Hello there, and welcome to the Archive in Between, where I read stories collected from across the dimensions. Take a subscription so you can find me again if you wander off. Today's story is called The Fey Lord's Court by Eat My Username on Reddit. Part 1. The Fey took me in typical fashion, as I slept. I had been dozing under a tree, head resting on my pack, my legs sprawled out in the afternoon sunlight. And then, I was in their realm. I awoke in a large glade. Overhead, the dark purple clouds hung low, and there was a hint of a rainstorm on the howling wind. The distended black trees of the shadow forest loomed far above me, and, as lightning cracked high above, the boughs cast long shadows across the forest floor. To my surprise, I was in a chair, though it was rough-hewn out of a single piece of wood. I looked down to see I was seated in the precise center of a geometric design. The design itself was intricate, and composed of hundreds of different mushrooms and fungi. I decided I should stay in my seat. What would happen if I tried to cross that circle I did not want to think about? To my right and left, a row of chairs extended across the glade, forming a walkway that led to the figure opposite me. This figure was known to me. Elthwin sat before me, imperious and yet unserious as ever. He sat behind a comically overdone bench of the sort you would find in any courthouse around the world. His feet were kicked up on the table's surface, and he picked at his teeth with the handle of an ostentatious gavel. Noticing me wake, Elthwin stood and clapped his hands together, pulling his feet back off the table in delight.
"Wonderful,"
the tall, androgynous creature chirped.
"Now that the accused has joined us, we can finally begin. Do you know why you are here?"
I knew all too well. For all Elthwin's power and guile, subtlety was not one of his strong suits. His pantomime here was about as discreet as a sledgehammer. I had let the trespassers in the forest leave alive, rather than allow them to fall into Elthwin and the other Fae's traps. I had allowed them to live, contenting myself that human justice would account for their crimes. Now, it appeared Elthwin had decided that I was to face the justice of the Fae in their stead. He obviously intended to punish me under the terms of our compact. This facade of a courtroom was just his way of torturing me, and entertaining himself.
"Yes," I replied. "I believe I do." "Excellent," the Fae smiled. "Then, shall we begin?"
He clapped his hands again, and along the empty aisle seats, forest creatures began to appear. Rabbits and foxes and toads, dozens of them. Up on the bench, Elthwin was affixing a comical barrister's wig over his silver hair.
"You stand accused of—"
I cleared my throat loudly. The forest creatures started, not used to seeing a living creature show disrespect to Elthwin. Elthwin broke off, and wearing a stiff smile that concealed his true rage, stared directly into my eyes.
"Something you'd like to say before we begin?"
I nodded, and drew in a deep breath. The Fae had always been unnerving, my patron though he was. As an opponent, it was quite something else. The revulsion and anxiety he always engendered in me was quickly cementing into genuine fear and panic. I pushed it down. There was only one trick left to play. For this to be a fair trial, I must be allowed a representative. Elthwin laughed and looked around.
"Of course, how silly of me. I'm sure one of these kind creatures would be happy to present your case."
A brief pause followed, as the surrounding animals chittered in what sounded suspiciously like polite laughter.
"No takers?"
Elthwin continued, turning back to face me.
"Unless you have someone who can be here right now, I'm afraid we just can't wait."
His smile was venomous, and it was a pleasure to watch it drop as I nodded and spoke. "I can meet those terms." I dropped my head, and under my breath, I whispered a name. Having lived a long time in the forests and wild places, I had learned to respect the powerful forces that underpin all natural things. This was why I feared and respected the Fae. They were, without doubt, one of the most powerful forces one could call upon. But they were not the only one, and some years back, I had met one of the others. At that time, he had needed the help of a mortal actor, and I had happily obliged. Thus, as payment, he had promised me his assistance, if I ever deemed it necessary. I decided that today, with my back against the wall, was that time. Slowly, smoke began to rise from beneath my feet. The mushrooms that encircled me burned away, producing a foul black smoke that swathed both myself and the chair I sat upon. My view of Elthwyn and the glade was obstructed, and in the darkness I felt a reassuring hand grasp my shoulder. As the smoke cleared and I could see again, I saw that Elthwyn's face was stricken with equal parts incredulity and disgust. I looked up and regarded the tall figure beside me. I saw he had dressed for the occasion, choosing to wear a trim navy blue suit. His beard, unruly when I had met him, was trimmed down and neat. In his free hand he carried a briefcase. "Sorry for being late, Your Honor," he demurred. "I'm ready to begin when you are." I guess the Jinn have a sense of humor, too. Part 2. The rain cloud high above seethed. Lightning and static discharge flickered between the voluminous purple banks. Periodically, the bolts of electricity flickered downwards with thunderous declamations. These shook the earth, and leaves fluttered down from their branches. Unperturbed, my lawyer was giving his opening statements. He'd been giving them for the last 40 minutes. I found myself quite uncomfortable as the Jinn espoused my virtues to the assembled court of forest animals, using terms that would have made a saint blush. "And might I add, Your Honor," he continued, "the absence of a court stenographer is a clear violation of standard court protocol, not to mention the conflict of interest that is presented by having the chief plaintiff serving as the arbitrator in a contractual dispute." Looking into Elthwyn's eyes, it became apparent that he was the cause of the weather disturbance. Fury burned in those bright blue eyes, threatening to slip its leash and burn all it saw. Elthwyn clicked his fingers, and a small rabbit hopped up onto the judge's bench, and proceeded to tap against a typewriter that appeared in front of it. Elthwyn cocked an eyebrow at the Jinn questioningly. The Jinn simply nodded. His name was Hazan, an old acquaintance I had once done a favor for. He had come to make good on his debt, and no doubt to test himself against the Fey Lords, who were worthy rivals for one of his power. His navy blue suit, professional and well-fitted, was in stark contrast to his forest surroundings. I wore my woods clothes, dirty and ragged from many miles on backcountry tracks, and Elthwyn wore a long, flowing silk robe that fluttered in the breeze. The Jinn finally nodded assent to the magistrate Fay, and resumed his place at my side. Elthwyn leaned forward on his elbows. "If you're all done, Master Hazan, may we proceed to the matter at hand?" "Of course, Your Honor," the Jinn replied, stretching the honorific in a way that spoke volumes. "I would be most grateful if we could deal with this directly. I have other appointments this afternoon." The glib wit obviously annoyed the Fae, for a bolt of lightning crashed into the center of the glade with an ear-splitting crack. The Jinn looked down and checked his wristwatch nonchalantly. Elthwyn brought his fist down on the table. "Direct! This worthless earthworm signed a pact with me. He broke that pact. His soul is forfeit to me, for me to do as I please. How's that for direct?" "Of course, the pact. One moment." The Jinn turned and rummaged in his open briefcase. He pulled out and discarded several items as he searched, digging arm-deep in the small case, like a 2-bit magician performing a parlor trick. "Ah, yes, here it is." The lawyer genie presented the faded document, holding it up in his hands. The faded parchment was cracked, and much worse for wear. At the sight of the document, Elthwyn reached quickly into his robe, and snatched his empty hand back out.
His face contorted into a sneering, fang-prominent grimace. "How did you get that?" the Fey Lord growled. "You worthless mystic piece of—" The earth began to rumble, as all around the forest lightning crashed into the earth. Hazan simply smiled abashedly. "So we agree this is the document in question?" The scowling Elfwin controlled himself, easing back into his dais. "Yes, that's the document in question. It's the master copy, which you must be aware of since you pilfered it." The Jinn held his free hand to his chest in mock outrage. "My lord, you surely cannot be implying— It's beggar's belief to think that you are insinuating, that you are accusing me of stealing a legal document? My lord, I can assure you—" "Enough!" screamed Elfwin. "It's the document. Make your point." The Jinn smiled and turned with the document outstretched, as though to show it to the assembled gallery of animals. "This document is signed by both yourself and the accused?" "It is." "Is it notarized?" "Notarized?" the Fae questioned. "Are you seriously asking me if the sole binding contract between a Fae and his protege is notarized?" "It is fairly standard practice for important legal documents, my lord. But no matter." He flipped through the pages and found his mark. "Here, page 3. This passage outlining the conditions of the pact, punishments and retributions. Is this smudge supposed to be a comma?" The Jinn held the book out to the Fae and showed him. The Fae squinted and reviewed the parchment. The page was marked with soot and dust, and was falling apart. Between two words there was a dark mark, not quite a comma, not quite a smudge, but close to both. "I can't tell," the Fae admitted, "but it doesn't matter." "It wouldn't matter if you had notarized this, my lord, or had stored redundant copies in a more suitable area than this lovely locale. A comma in this sentence has serious implications for the definitional basis of the contract." "You can't seriously be hanging the validity of this pact on a single comma, Master Jinn," the judge objected. "This is a binding contract." "Not a single comma, my lord. This is just the first of 700 inconsistencies or illegible markings in this document. I had thought we would simply best start from the beginning of the book." The Fey Lord sighed and looked directly at me. "You're very lucky. Not many of my patrons cross me and live. Make sure you remember that for next time." The Jinn straightened up. "Am I to take it that we won't be proceeding further, Your Honor?" "For now. I'll need the document amended." The Jinn nodded. "Check your other pocket. A notarized and signed agreement, so that this won't happen again." The Fey Lord reached into his robe and produced a similarly old-looking manuscript. "Get the hell out of my forest!" When I awoke back under my tree, a business card lay on my chest. On its front, in tastefully watermarked and embossed script, read, "Hazan Jinn Esquire and Associates." On the back, there was a handwritten note. "Consider our debt settled." Thanks for stopping by and listening to the story. Take a subscription. It'll lead you back if you get lost, and it'll let you know when I'm ready to read again. If you have any ideas about what I should read next, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to get the author's permission if I don't have it already. I look forward to seeing you back here in the future.